if you were to look at just very few, you've actually spoken there quite about education, trying to make these youngsters embrace education, and even trying to facilitate as a member of parliament, maybe through bursaries or whatever. But in those 3 straight terms as a member of parliament, when you look back, what is it that you are so proud of? Some of the things that you did, that you even wish those ones who are coming, the younger leaders, maybe where you left, where they can pick from. What is it that makes you, at least when you look back, you say that, okay, I was able to actually serve my country as a member of parliament, and specifically my people of Kacheliba. I'm proud, this is what I tried to do, and we achieved this.
I was very satisfied that after my departure, the next person coming in would have an easy task of building on what I had already done. It was my strategy to build as many primary schools, which we did with a lot of support. Built enough secondary schools as a result of the growing number of kids. But more importantly, was to make sure that there were boarding schools. And so I worked to make sure that all our schools were boarding schools. We did not have very many day schools, by the way, because of pastoralist lifestyles. And so if you find any school in Kacheliba, which is a primary school, any, I probably built it. But not just me. We worked very closely with the church, the churches, or the religious organizations to do it. When we had CDF, we used a lot of it to build schools. Because I believed personally that the most important gift I can give to my people was education. It wasn't cows, it wasn't goats. They already have enough of that. It is education. That would change their lifestyle, and they change the future generation. And I can tell you, I'm so proud when I meet people now who tell me that they went through those systems of schools, and now they are big people, they are graduates, they are all sorts of people. It is important that people note that when I was first elected, when I went to talk to the Pokot elders, I told them that I'm here because I want education. They didn't like it. In fact, a lot of them didn't vote for me because they say, you're coming to change our lives. I said, yes, this is what I'm going, but I'll tell you, you'll thank me later for this. Why? And so I used to tell them that if you are better educated, you can survive in this world better, in this modern world better. And if you put your child now, it is a seed for you to harvest tomorrow. And it was a very difficult language for me to use, but I had to use Pokot idioms and expressions that made them understand why I was very keen on that. And I didn't care if they didn't vote for me. I just wanted them to understand. But fortunately, just about the time of election, they clicked. It clicked. Because I was comparing it with the surrounding. I said, look at your enemies or the people or your opponents, whatever it is. The reason they'll always be ahead of you, the Karamojong, the Turkana, is that they have educated their children. Now, you see, you can be powerful, but if you're not educated, the future is bleak. We got this conversation until they got it. And when they got it, they voted for me, even when I did not expect them at all to vote for me that first year. I was just going to test the waters, right? And that gave me the confidence to do. Today, they'll tell you that I did what I said I would do. In fact, at some point, working with some of the district commissioners, we actually literally went hunting for the children in their homes and bringing them to school. And many times we actually used force where it was necessary. And we wanted them to understand it's important. And so that's what I did. Some of them may not thank me for it. Some of them may not like me for that. But we needed to change the narrative of the Pokot. That picture you're talking about, we needed to change that. And that's why today I can walk with my head high that I left that place, Kachaliba constituency, having changed the place to what it is today.
During that period, those 3 terms in Parliament, you also served as a minister, as a cabinet minister. And when I was preparing this program, I was actually going through an old newspaper, especially. I was interested with your teaching as a journalist, and there's one where the Standard said that Senator Poghisio is a journalist himself because he's taught many of us as journalists. But when he was actually Minister of Information, he actually oversaw one of those draconian media.
Yes,
I want you to defend yourself against that.
No,
that accusation that people expected you as one of us, that you're actually the one who was actually going to be very strong on these legislations on journalism and the media in the country. But then the way the newspaper put it is that you actually oversaw one of the draconian legislations on media.
Interesting thing, because of course you have to be the Minister for Information to oversee that. And so I happened to be the Minister for Information and Communications at that particular time.
Yes.
And the media bill, I think that's the one that was in the House that time, had been drafted, and the journalists of the media fraternity called it all sorts of names. I remember there were demonstrations in the streets when that thing passed. It was demonstrations. I was demonized. I was caricatured. But I think eventually they must have realized that there was nothing draconian about that law. It was important for the nation to realize that sometimes, especially during that particular time, we had gone through what we had gone through as a country when I became minister. You would know that we were almost under a state of emergency. It was not normal times. And I think that media needed to understand that. We needed to make sure that media was handled differently during that particular time. When you are in, for example, war situation, you don't deal with things as though we were at peace or in a peace situation. And those were very difficult days for Kenya. And so if we came out of that, later on, as you can see, when now we did the 2010 Constitution, then you can see that the country was now ready, okay, to give more freedom, to give a lot of freedom. In fact, the section in the Constitution about the media is amazingly covered. And so you can see the 2 times, in 2007, 2008, 2009, things were not the same. In 2010, we were ready. And so it's sometimes better for people to understand. The times were different. But later, when we were now negotiating the Constitution, it was possible for us to reach the same understanding. Yeah. So I was vindicated thereafter.
Great. Now let's talk about the Senate. Before we actually talk about these tussles between the Senate, the national government, and the county governments. But again, when you now felt that you could actually serve your people as a senator,
yep.
What is it that actually, what was the inspiration, what was the trigger that you felt that after those 3 terms as a member of parliament, you wanted to go to the Senate to represent the people of West Pokot? And when you look back, have you been able to achieve what you sought when you ran for that position as a senator?
Because I was part of the constitution-making process, I understood the role of a senator. And having been a member of parliament, and I've basically outgrown that position, literally, because I've been there for 3 terms continuously, did what I needed to do. There was an opportunity to come up to the county level and do the same in parts of the county that I also knew needed the same message that I had. But more importantly, the role of a Senate and the senator is to protect its county and that county government. And I thought, given my experience, given my tenure in politics, and having served as minister, served as assistant minister. In fact, that's what you forgot, that I started as an assistant minister for education, higher education, when I was just in the year 2000 to 2002. So I was an assistant minister first, and then in 2007 I became 2008 I became a minister, and then for that time. So basically, I then realized that I was now well prepared, well prepared, well trained to handle any responsibility. And one of those responsibilities is I did not think about even going for governorship, because I wanted to deal with legislation, I wanted to deal with oversight, and also in just making sure we strengthened the economy of West Pokot, because the advantage of devolution was coming. Advantage was that the place which had hitherto lacked development for many years can now begin to actually experience development, and with monies going directly to the county. That's what really attracted me to run for this, and that I would be there to see that that resource is well placed and well utilized. So that's what really made me. And so up to this point, and now you see the problem with that position is that now you have the money going from the treasury to a person on the ground called the governor. And the thing about it is that we needed to have a conversation with the governor, okay, that this resource, okay, must be utilized properly and not misplaced, not misappropriated. Because that's where the big problem is when it gets there and people begin to enrich themselves. People begin to, instead of using the resource for the purpose that is intended, a lot of the people who work for the county governments then themselves become richer. Some of them richer than the counties that they actually represent.
Yeah, I think yes, I think that's a very important point there that the senator is actually talking about.
You're not born a senator. I mean, you're not always. You need to know what to do.
Yeah.
Trained in terms of what their job and so on. Strengthen them, orientations and so on and so on. So we need to give that ability to senators, so that they understand. Then, of course, we speak and work with governors. That the Senate is not the enemy, or the senator is not your enemy. What they are doing in oversight is basically their responsibility, and they're not after you, after your job. And so the Senate and the county government should be able to work together instead of looking at each other like he's come to look over my shoulder. But there are other institutions that are actually now helping. The other institutions in government, the ones I'm talking about, the DCI and the prosecutor's office and also the ESCC have now been also devolved, and so now it's possible at close range to monitor what's happening and so on. So that is what we intend to do, and we reorganize our committees and strengthen our committee systems to be sure that Senate does that oversight work properly.
Now, you actually, congratulations, you come to our program as Senate Majority Leader.
Yes.
If very briefly, before I ask you our two last questions, what is the role of a Senate Majority Leader?
Yeah,
if you could just educate our listeners.
Exactly. In this new system of Parliament, which is bicameral, where you have Senate and National Assembly, names were changed. In the older system, when there was only one Parliament, we used to have somebody called the Leader of Government Business. And that position that time was actually still very powerful, held by the person who was Vice President of the day. It was a Leader of Government Business. And then there was a Leader of Official Opposition in the older system. But when this system was created, the names were changed. The person who takes responsibility of government business in the Senate and in the National Assembly is called the Leader of Majority, or Majority Leader. And the one on the other side is called the Minority Leader, which is one way of expressing the same thing, really. And so the agenda from the meeting of the Senate Business Committee, which sets up the agenda in the order paper, to all the government business and legislative business, and also when it comes to the budget of government. It is the leader who moves those motions. It's a leader who then prepares the list for people to vote on his side and convinces everybody to vote for government business. And of course liaising with the chairman of committees and the departments they represent in government. And so it is a very elaborate, quite a big role that is really requiring that you work with government quite closely.
Are you prepared for the job?
I am trained and prepared, and I am willing and able to do this job. It is really a good place for me to start gauging and for people to see. How do you know? How much of government business has gone through. That's how you judge. If the success rate is higher, then you know I have succeeded. You know, how do you bring people to vote for government business? That is a skill. That's what experience brings out, and that's going to be my duty. And if you see that initially we still have these teething problems, it is because I entered this job at a time when there is some division within the side of government. And so as I go there, initially there will be a lot of teething problems as we know them. But I'm sure that given a few weeks or so, we should be able to get to the place where we can pass government business seamlessly. And as long as we believe that we have the understanding that when you are in government, that is your side, you support it. But we have to work across the aisle with the people across the aisle. You know, you don't just focus. That's the other tough job for the leader of government business or the leader of the majority, is that you really have to have a working relationship with the other side, the minority side. Because a lot of times, that is actually where you need support from. You're not just looking for support from your side. And so I have to work with Senator Orengo very, very closely, because and his team very, very closely. And then I also have to have the support of my entire team, the people that I've been elected with. You know, they really must give you support. You know, if they undermine you, you'll fail. So I would hope that I can then get my team and then work very closely with the other side to make sure that government business.
Great. The last question would be that, so what is the relationship between the Senate and the National Assembly? Because we've always had these supremacy wars. I think those are some of the things would actually stall some of the programs that you might want to undertake as government or as Senate.
Yep.
Yes. So how are you going to address this problem? Or this is something that is actually created by the media. There's no tussle between the National Assembly and the Senate about supremacy wars.
Well, I think you saw the other day, I think it was in some form of some media, when the two leaders of majority were having a very serious exchange, making it look like there's a big problem actually. The relationship between the Senate and the National Assembly is one of the things that's going to be on my in-tray as I go now, because the way that we're supposed to work together is that when bills are passed from one house, they should go to the other house and they should get support. And so we need to work together. But many times when they go to the other house, there are problems, and it has caused the Senate even to go to court. And yet really they should never be necessary for the Senate to go to court to deal with its own issues with the sister institution or the other house. We are actually one parliament. Funny enough, we are actually one parliament, just two houses. And so it's one of the things that will have me to work, engage with the leader majority on the other house, and make sure that where we all agree, where we don't agree, there's mechanism for that. We don't have to reach a point where we have to take each other to court when we have actually the same thing. But it has been there. It's not something that's a rumor. It's not anything that's created by the media. It's been there. So one of the things that is waiting for me to participate in is that one. Yes.
As a media scholar, you've actually come to grace our program here at the National Broadcaster KBC English Service. Walking across the corridors and even coming to our studio, you are one of the most informed people who actually understand the role of the public broadcaster, or even the place of KBC, in the country. But do you think that there are certain things that you think you can actually speak for the public broadcaster, especially because I think you are more informed than many people, because you've served as a Minister of Information. You are a media scholar. You've trained some of us.
Yes.
On a lighter note, yes.
I knew of the condition at KBC many years when I was minister. I used to come here and see the situation was not good at all. KBC has a very bad it's a very important institution which is not well resourced, not well funded, and they have issues that need to be dealt with. And I can see. I've looked at the state of affairs in even the infrastructure that you have, and I know that there is a big problem here. But the reason I am a member of the ICT committee of the Senate, I'm also a member of a subcommittee that's specifically looking at KBC. So this is not just a matter of light matter. We are seized with the situation in KBC as members of the Senate, and now as majority leader, and still in that subcommittee. I want to assure the institution called KBC and the listeners that we are working to make sure that KBC receives the support it's supposed to receive, but also just be transformed, to be modernized. KBC must be as modern as can be, because it is the public broadcaster, and then we must stand behind that. So one of the other things you must understand as well is that for me to succeed in government business, this is one of the institutions that must be also partnering with me and with the Senate to make sure that devolution is strengthened, to make sure that oversight is strengthened, public participation is effective. So this is not just a matter to take lightly. This is a serious matter that you have raised, and I think you can see that I'm seized with it.